Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to our Wednesday webinar series. I'm Garrett Anderson, the Marketing Director for Contract Furnishings Mart. Hope everybody had a great sunny Mother's Day. I know the weather has changed now. Also have a couple shout outs. First, my grandma turns 90 today, so happy birthday, Grandma. And also my beautiful daughter Paisley turns 4 tomorrow. So a couple big milestones here from my household at least. Today we're talking about hardwood flooring. We're here in Clackamas. I have my dear friend, former CFMer with me, Will McHarness. He's currently our PacMat rep. Huge supporter, huge friend of the program. So thank you for taking some time to help educate us all today.
Yeah, thank you.
We're talking about hardwoods. So let's just dive right in. First, why would anyone want hardwoods in their home?
Hardwood floors, well, it's the very first floor covering I think that was ever used. But they're timeless. They're warm, they add value to your home. You can't beat that natural look. It's just, I think it's probably the most cherished flooring that there is out there. So.
Right. Now, I want to talk about a few misconceptions that I know that we get from homeowners in here, and I'm sure you see it on the rep side as well. First, that question of wanting real hardwood floors. And when they're talking about a solid versus an engineered, which is just different constructions.
Yeah.
But again, both are real hardwoods. Why don't you talk us a little bit about that construction and how they're different yet the same?
Yeah, absolutely. The most common hardwood floor over time has been a 3/4 inch solid. So that's if you have an older home, that's most likely what's going to be in there as well. But then as technology advanced and trends were changing, the engineered floors started coming in, and this is where the people started saying, well, real hardwood versus the fake hardwood. And engineered floors are 100% made out of wood. They're just have a cross-ply lamination or some different technologies going on there. And you'll even see some with an HDF core these days, but again, these are actual hardwood floors. So if you want to look, we have an example here of an engineered hardwood versus a solid hardwood. And when they're actually completely installed, you'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference between the two. It's just on the technical side whether you would choose to go with a solid or an engineered. But they are very real, so depending on the different technologies that you're using.
3/4 inch thick solid construction versus engineered, which is, again, just that same species layer on top, but you have a construction underneath that you don't see.
Correct.
That adds dimensional stability and a lot of other benefits.
Yeah, over the years technology has just advanced and we're doing things better, making things stronger, and as the homeowner you'll benefit from those different construction
And we see a lot more, not just because of trends, which we'll talk about, but also just our climate here in the Northwest, right?
Oh yeah.
We tend to have a little bit of rain and moisture,
just
if you've
a little
noticed.
bit, yeah. So the engineered, with the trends going wider and wider, it's very difficult to make a narrow plank move on the floor, but most people are going with a 3 inch, a 4 inch, a 5 inch. We have all the way up to almost a 9 inch plank nowadays. So in our climate where it could be 80 degrees one day and quite literally raining the very next day, your hardwood floors are going to be expanding and contracting due to all the different moisture aspects of that. So that's where, when you're talking to a sales professional, they're going to probably steer you one way or the other depending on what you're telling them about your lifestyle.
Right, and that movement you mentioned is more prominent in the width than in the length. So as you go with the wider aesthetics, that's really why you need that additional engineering structural support.
Yeah, very much so. The day that it's installed, it's going to look nice and tight, but if you have a wide plank solid, you might wake up the next day and see some gaps in the floor, or you might see some character happening because, again, trees are a very porous material and it's constantly breathing in the environment.
Right. So we mentioned some of the trends, and we're talking about wider planks. Generally, they used to only be able to make these hardwoods in this construction, 2 1/4 inch width, which we both have in our 1965
Correct.
houses.
Yeah.
Technology allowed them to get wider and wider, and now you see, like you mentioned, some of these really wide planks. So generally, the trend is that wider plank, more of a low luster, and really just to show off the beauty, but definitely that wider plank. A lot of these more natural, warmer tones are coming back as well.
Yeah, exactly. But just to reiterate, there's no way that you could keep a 7 to a 9 inch plank completely flat without using some of that engineered technology.
Right. And we talked a little bit about those different constructions. Probably the most prominent is the cross-laminated plywood layers.
Correct.
And really, that's just what it's. They're cross-laminated so that one's trying to move this way and the other one's fighting it moving the other way.
Yes, exactly. It's just the overall dimension dimensional stability of plywood is the technology that's at work here. So you still have a nice species layer on the surface, giving you all that beautiful character. But underneath, we just realized that plywood is so dimensionally stable. So as they want to expand and contract, the fact that the plies are going multi-directions, it holds it true.
Now, I know a lot of people might look at the HDF core and consider that kind of a lesser quality.
Yeah, it's just it's the same stigma, I guess, when the plywood engineered started coming out. People said, well, I don't want that on my floor. Once it's installed, it's absolutely gorgeous. But again, technologies are advancing, and this specific Bruce product, Bruce exclusive, is made right here in the United States of America. And with rigorous testing, they found out that it's far more water resistant, it's far more dent resistant, it has a higher PSI rating to it, and it is so stable that you don't even need to acclimate it. We can get into acclimation later with the installation side of things, but yeah, as technologies advance, it's actually a superior technology at work here, and just a new way of making hardwood flooring.
Now, since you brought it up, let's talk briefly about the Made in America aspect, because I know one of the trends also is we're seeing less of the exotic species.
Yes.
And why is that?
NWFA, the National Wood Flooring Association, has put some pretty strict guidelines on responsible harvesting of wood. I know a while back you could get a tiger wood, you could get a wenge, you could get all these different species of wood, and then almost overnight they disappeared because a watchdog service came on board and started making people just started vetting people where they got their wood from, because the rainforests were just being ravaged, and there was actually a black market to the wood industry. So now we're seeing a lot more domestic species. You're going to see a lot of hickory, a lot of oak, a lot of ash, a lot of maple, things of that nature, and not so many exotics anymore. And if you do see an exotic wood, make sure that it has an emblem on there saying that it's been vetted by the National Wood Flooring Association.
Right. Yeah, very important. I think a lot of people just have that in mind right now, wanting to support local and support American made.
Yeah, and American made as well, because a lot of the world's plywood is made in China, and we certainly have a lot of wonderful products that are made in China and imported right now, but I think we would all agree that we're trying to find more and more reasons to shop local, and support American brands. So whenever you see a product that proudly displays the American flag and made in the USA, give it a second look, and you know that it's actually made with quality adhesives, using quality labor force, and that were treated fairly.
Nice. So. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the other benefits to an engineered floor. I know it's more dimensionally stable, so that's the reason why you can put it below grade. Mm-hmm. Great option there. And you can also install it some different ways. You can nail it, you can float it, you can glue it.
Correct.
So it's really just opening up some options beyond just the traditional way of nailing it in, right?
Yeah, so by below grade, Garrett's referring to in a basement. You can actually put a hardwood flooring in a basement now. You would never see that in an older home. But daylight basements are still considered below grade as well. On grade is right street level when you walk, and then above grade would be any of the floors that you have in your home above that as well. But you can literally nowadays put wood flooring through your whole entire house. And if you must have a hardwood floor, let's say in my case I have an existing hardwood floor, but I'm doing a remodel and I want to put something in the basement, I think you would agree that if you had a 3/4 inch solid on the grade floor of your house, and then below grade you wanted to put it engineered, to the eye you would never really know the difference once it's installed.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, nice to have that consistency when it comes up.
Definitely.
Also a consideration, floating it. There are a couple lines, if you want to look at this guy from Cares, that actually has a locking mechanism.
Correct.
So whereas most engineered floors are going to have just your traditional tongue and groove.
Correct.
You can still float those with a TNG adhesive.
Correct.
So you're basically just adhering those planks together instead of to the subfloor.
Yep.
There are also options that lock into place, so really pretty straightforward installation.
Yeah, the interlocking floors are definitely geared towards the homeowners that want to do it themselves. When it comes to nailing down the floors, I would probably definitely lean towards a professional installer. But again, it just depends when you're talking to your sales professional. If they find out that you are doing it yourself, they might steer you more towards a floating floor. And then obviously if you're putting it in below grade on a concrete substrate, you would have to float it. You wouldn't be able to nail that in. So you would want to put a moisture barrier down and then either glue the tongue and groove together using a TNG adhesive, as Garrett said, or just do a click float option for that as well.
Always a good idea to err on the side of caution, in my opinion, and maybe hire a trained professional.
Definitely, especially if you are going below grade or putting in a stairwell or there's wonderful trained professionals. I think you guys have a list of people that you have vetted as well that are just friends of the industry and would do a wonderful job. On a smaller scale, if you're doing a little room, you could easily click together a floor without causing too much damage. But when you're doing an entire home, you probably don't have a moisture meter handy, or you don't have a calcium chloride test. And if those things all seem Greek to you, it's because the humidity
you're
levels.
Not a hardwood floor installer.
Yeah, the humidity levels play a huge role in the success or a failure of an installation.
Right. Yeah, a lot of considerations in the installation of hardwood. As you mentioned, we do have a 3-page list of independent contractors that are all licensed, bonded, and insured. So if you do need help on that side of things, we can certainly make those suggestions, recommendations, and get you lined up with a professional who can take care of this and kind of remove that uncertainty and maybe any fears of putting that in.
Yeah, well, put it this way. I'm going through a remodel right now. I have the original 2-inch oak from 1965 in my home. We're taking out a wall and we're continuing oak through the rest. I'm calling for backup. And I do this stuff for a living, but I'm not going to tackle that without having the right people on the job.
So that project that you're doing this summer, we did a couple years ago at our house as well. And the results turned out beautifully. So you can still get these in a lot of older homes that have a 2¼ inch oak. You can get the same material unfinished, install it, kind of weave it in.
Correct.
And again,
Yeah,
a trained professional can make
exactly.
that look so you don't have just this transition strip of old versus new.
Yeah.
They make that an integral part. You wouldn't notice the difference. You can sand the whole thing and refinish it right there on site.
Oh yeah, that's one of the beauties of the hardwood floor is just all the wonderful different things that you can do with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you do have that unfinished option. Most of these that we're going to show and that you see regularly are going to have a factory finish.
Correct.
Which is just, multiple times more layers of the finish and multi-million-dollar factory equipment that can really bake these finishes on.
Correct, yeah. The sand on site finishes, you usually get 2 to 3 coats. It is just applied to the floor. 24 hours later you apply a different coat, and then 24 hours later usually the installer needs to get on to another job. You guys need your home back, and so you get about 2 coats that are just air dried in the standard temperature of the home, whereas a factory pre-finished floor usually has 7 to 10 coats, reinforced with an aluminum oxide or maybe a quartz or sometimes a diamond finish that's in there. And what that means is basically a lot more technology is at work there, and these finishes are sturdy. You won't need to refinish this floor for quite a long time.
And that's another question that I'm sure you hear a lot is, I want to get something that I can refinish down the road, but when we're looking at factory finishes, you're likely not going to need it. I think what people have in mind is that they have an maybe older wood floor like this 2¼ that may have been sanded and finished on site.
Correct.
Which doesn't have as much of that technology incorporated into the finish, has scratched earlier and then needs to be sanded refinished, versus something that's a little bit more durable, baked in as far as the finish goes, that won't require that sanding maybe ever. You'll probably get tired of looking at it before you need to sand and finish it.
And it's an honest question. Unless you do this for a living, you're going to be curious. So I think every time I've ever sold a hardwood floor, somebody has asked, how many times can I refinish this floor? And I will answer their question because depending on the overall species thickness, there is a few times that you can get a good sand and refinish on this. But I will set their mind at ease, I guess, because with these factory finishes that you have these days, you will not need to refinish these floors 20 to 30 years. Again, my house, 1965, my floors definitely need to be refinished. But think of it, from 1965, and I'm just now refinishing them.
Right.
So.
And honestly, a lot of these factory finishes or even engineered floors can be refinished, sanded refinished, if you like.
They certainly can.
There are topical treatments that you could, now we're not going to go into, but that you can do that kind of etch the finish and allow you to apply a new one on. So you don't have to go through the whole sanding process. But even if you take a look at this engineered floor, a lot of these, especially in the higher end ones, they have a pretty beefy species layer on top. And that does give almost the same amount of workable space to sand and refinish as you do with a solid.
Correct.
Before you get into the tongue and groove.
Because, well, the tongue is not on here, but just imagine with me. So the tongue would sit right about here, and you would shoot the staple or the nail at a 45-degree angle into the subfloor. So the head of that staple or nail would sit right about here, and if you compare the two, you've got almost the exact same amount of working room. So you can refinish a quality engineered floor just as many times as you can refinish a solid 3/4 inch floor.
Now there's another finish that is out there. It's not maybe as common, but it's this guy right here that has an oil finish.
Correct.
And so, I mean, I guess the nice benefits to an oil finish is that you're looking at the natural beauty of the wood.
Correct.
There's not any sort of plasticky type of a finish layer on top that might skew that look. So you get to see the grain, you get to see the depth and the clarity, and you can touch it up.
Yeah, you can maintain it yourself, but there is some maintenance involved there.
Right, which does scare a lot of people away as soon as they hear additional maintenance, because you do want to keep rehydrating that. Correct. With a reapplication of the oil about every year, right? At least in the high traffic areas.
Yeah, and some people really like a glossy floor. To them, shiny means clean. But honestly, more and more people want that more of a matte finish or more of a cashmere finish, if you will. And with the oil finish, you really get that. It kind of brings out all the natural wood grain and whatnot. So to each their own, and you can certainly find all the above here at Contract Furnishings Mart.
And then to go along with that trend, I mean, we used to see a lot of the really aggressive hand scraping.
Yeah.
And now it's gone to more of a lighter hand brush or wire brush.
Correct. I mean, you could see some of this wonderful rustic saw marks and things like that. Depending on if your home is in the mountains or whatever the case may be. I mean, you see these in a Pearl District loft as well, just for kind of that shabby chic, I guess you could say, look when it comes to some of those things. But we're not seeing that trend as much anymore. A lot of people are just going with a really wide, really long plank to just show off all that natural character of the wood.
Right, and more the lighter tones, warmer tones, more naturals.
Yeah.
We did see grays for a number of years. Now we have maybe some like gray, cooler tones mixed with some warmth as a nice combination.
Yeah,
and
people are bringing back patterns.
At this guy right here with the herringbone setting. That is a unique layout.
Yeah.
Probably not for everyone, but certainly it has a place, and there's some really cool ways that you can install these hardwood floors now.
Yeah, that floor makes a statement. So definitely, if you want to pop when you walk into a space, so be it. Whereas the natural look, just a natural oak, natural hickory, natural maple, so on and so forth, they're timeless. They never go out of style. It always looks great, but you can also get much more design oriented with it as well.
Right. Now, a lot of people end up, they select their hardwood, and it's beautiful. It's going in large runs, predominantly in like the whole main floor of a home, and maybe doing some softer stuff and carpet upstairs, perhaps. But a lot of people may not think about when they're making this purchase, but you're going to want to soften things up after you get a whole room of a hardwood floor that can reflect sound and really isn't as comfy and cozy as people might anticipate.
Yeah, usually the first thing you do once you put in a beautiful new hardwood floors is buy an area rug. So it's common and it's very nice. I mean, I have younger children. I like rolling around on the floor and things like that. I know you do as well. So yeah, rugs are very appropriate.
Right. Yeah, so something to keep in mind for comfort and for acoustics. And again, just to add some design aspects to it if you'd like. If you want to make this your focus and your design element perfect, if you want to go something a little bit more neutral, then you can add some flavor and customize it with your area rug, which again, we talked about last week. We can certainly help you out with that.
Yeah, and some of the area rugs on an older floor might actually cause a little bit of color change. I wouldn't worry about that. If you move the rug, the rest of the floor will catch up. But a lot of finishes these days have a UV cure to them as well. So even if it's in front of a window with southern exposure here in Oregon, you're not going to get a lot of dramatic fading and things like that.
That's a good point to remember.
Yeah.
What else can a homeowner expect when they have hardwood floors in their house? I know they're all going to ding, dent, and scratch.
They're going to ding, dent, and scratch. That's
right?
exactly right. Yeah, they all will. So there's the Jenka hardness rating, which is the way that they study the overall density of the wood. And sometimes folks will think that if it has a higher Jenka rating, it's not going to ding, dent, and scratch nearly as much as another wood will. But I would encourage you to embrace the character of a wood floor. It's going to ding, it's going to dent, it's going to scratch. Even if you buy the most high-end custom wood floor, it's still going to react like a wood floor. If you drop a frying pan, it's probably going to make a little dent in that floor. So
right. Yep. And know that, you got to expect to live with it, and it's going to live with you. Mm-hmm. Also, an expectation that comes up is the variation. I mean, if you're going around and trying to plan an entire house and decor around that little sample, that's not really reflective of what you're going to get that Mother Nature provides, right?
Oh yeah, I can't count the amount of times I've seen somebody come in with a sample that they've got from a home store with a little sticker on the back saying what it is, and they design their entire house around it, and they want the entire floor to look exactly like this. But no two trees are the same. They have knots, they have character, there's mineral streaks. So I was telling Garrett earlier, if you were to buy a floor, fall in love with it, and then have to relocate to another state and decided you love the other floor so much you wanted to put it in that home, it could look different than your other floor did, even though it was the same brand coming out of the exact same box. So I would embrace the fact that it's a product of nature and you're going to get some variation to it.
And we are fortunate these days to have the great room scene visualizers, a lot more imagery online. You can check out our website, use those room visualizers.
Yeah, those are great.
You can upload a picture of your own space and see some of these different options and how not patterns, but how the variation is going to show up, and really, I think, just get a better understanding of what you're purchasing ahead of time.
Yeah, I would definitely do that. A lot of people have a hard time visualizing the big picture of things. So come in and talk to a professional that has the ability to do so, or use the technology available to do so as well, so you're not disappointed. Or even buy a box. I mean, if you think about the overall investment, you're going to be spending thousands of dollars. Spend a couple $100, buy a box, and if you don't like it, then you just dodged a bullet, you know?
Yep.
So.
Yep. I'd rather waste a couple $100 than a couple thousand any day.
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about maintenance. You know, what should we expect? How do we take care of this investment?
That's great. Actually, I remember when I was a kid, one of my chores was to come home and mop the floor, and I would fill up the kitchen sink with suds, get the mop out, and man, I was cleaning that floor. And then all these years later, I look back and I think of all the ripples that were in the floor, and actually I probably did a lot of damage to my mother's floor.
Now you know why.
Yeah, that being said, less is more. Whether you have a sand on-site floor or whether you buy a pre-finished floor, I wouldn't clean it with anything aggressive. I would not clean it with anything that you wouldn't feel comfortable washing your own hands with. So non-toxic, most certainly. No harsh chemicals whatsoever. And again, just a very slight misting with maybe a Swiffer mop or a Bona. Bona is a popular brand that you can get at every corner store these days. Non-toxic, wonderful wood floor cleaner. Very, very little soap. I mean, less is more when it comes to cleaning these floors these days.
And avoid steam cleaning.
Yes, do not use a steam cleaner on your floor, please.
If you learn anything, don't do that.
Yeah, and on the commercial, it'll actually show somebody steam cleaning a wood floor. It makes me just want to fall off my couch every time I see it, because that's shooting boiling water into a hardwood floor is not recommended, and it is not covered by warranty. So
right. Something to keep in mind. I know we don't hard sell on warranties, but it is something to keep in mind. You know, whatever you end up purchasing, whether it's hardwood or an LVT carpet, just take a minute to go through and look online, find out what the manufacturer wants you to do to take care of your investment, and just try to follow those guidelines.
Yep.
Always safe bet.
Yeah, and the NWFA, the National Wood Flooring Association, has a website that all manufacturers follow suit on, so you can even start browsing through there.
Yeah. And finally, I think with hardwoods, the last expectation is beauty. I mean, it's really tough.
Yeah.
Technology has come so far, and I know one of those hot button topics is LVT and laminate, some of these digital image man-made creations. They have some limitations, and they cannot recreate the extent of variation. No two boards in a natural product are ever going to be the same.
That's correct, and I would just embrace all that natural beauty. I would embrace the fact that it's going to ding, dent, and scratch. I use the analogy when you buy a car and you roll it off the lot and it's completely flawless. Yes, it's a beautiful thing. But 20 years later, when it's got dings, dents, and all that character on it, it's still your favorite car. It still does its job. So these floors are going to get beat up a little bit over the years, but they're designed for a busy lifestyle, for children, for pets. You don't have to fret over your wood floor. And a lot of people are spending good money to make it look a little bit more beat up, you know, like all these character and things like that. So I would just embrace the fact that it's going to do that. It just adds to the style of the space.
Yeah, you spend a little more to get the jeans already with holes in them.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Real quick, were there any questions that you saw online, Daniel? Anything popping up? Okay, if you have anything, obviously leave them in the comments. That basically wraps up today. I want to thank you for taking the time. Oh, also wanted to just throw out a plug for all the transition pieces you need for these. Mm-hmm. So there are custom options you can go with treads and risers.
Stair treads, yeah.
They have stock options.
Vents, registers.
Yeah, and there's some really cool ones too that you can either have made in your exact species, exact stain, etc., or some more stock ones that are integrated that are pretty cool too.
That's correct, yeah.
So keep that in mind. Basically, all those different components you would ever need for your installation are available, and we can find those for you.
That's exactly right.
If there's no questions, just also want to remind you we do have a couple of CEUs coming up. So if you want to dive deeper, or if you're a designer or contractor that needs some of those continued education credits, check out our website at cfmfloors.com/events. There's some nice CEUs on there, and specifically around hardwood floors, because like we mentioned, there's a lot of things that you need to know before you install, especially.
That's correct.
And how you take care of these. That you just want to cover your bases and make sure you're protecting your investment, really.
Definitely. A PacMat would like to say, trust the experts. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and we'll always take good care of you.
All right. Well, thanks again, Will.
Thank you, Garrett.
Can't wait to hug you one of these days
All right,
soon.
man. Yeah,
hope
you got one
everybody,
coming.
Hope everybody is being safe out there. And tune in next week. I don't know what the topic is, but it's going to be great.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Take care.